As an undergraduate economics major and amateur economist, this whole field was a revelation to me. What I had as an understanding was of neoclassical economics, of a rational person out there in the marketplace jockeying and coolly making careful assessments of probability. And from lived experience, it's obvious nobody really does that. We have these unconscious biases whirring away in the background as we try to make decisions. And it's really no wonder we get so many things wrong. Some of these things seem to have arrived as a result of our evolutionary past. It was helpful, kept us alive. This idea of availability. You calculate probability on what comes to mind, which tends to be the most recent thing you can remember, right? That was probably useful. We have too many things to think about. So our brains had to develop some sort of shortcuts to get us through the day. Another example is the so-called negativity bias, which is the tendency to remember far better negative things that happen to us rather than positive things. And this also seemed to be a way that kept people alive. So you kept attuned to the threats, right? We don't really remember the picnic, but we remember the low roar of the saber-toothed tiger shortly before it pounced on our uncle. And the problem with this is it seems to get in the way of human happiness. If you remember bad things, that can be a problem. So these are some of the ideas I bring into my work at Star Tribune. They're sometimes thinly disguised. I don't use the word bias. I don't talk about cognitive bias, but I'm definitely writing about ideas that come out of this field. A lot of these columns are in service of one idea, and that's wealth accumulation and power accumulation rarely make you happy. And I don't know why this has been a rich vein for me to write in, but it started when I wrote for Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving happens to be a big day in the print life of Star Tribune. People are around the house, their families coming over in a little while, the football games haven't started. What are we going to do? Let's read Star Tribune. So the editors made Thanksgiving a big day in my annual calendar, and I didn't want to write about shopping. I'm not interested in shopping. And so it started out on sort of life happiness, life satisfaction, maybe more of a spiritual topic. One column ran a few years ago under the headline, "Money Doesn't Buy You Security." And the item that it sparked my interest with came from UBS. And it featured a stick figure on a treadmill on the cover of the report. And it assembled this report from a survey of people with $1 million and more in net worth. And you can maybe anticipate what some of the survey findings were. These very well-off UBS clients were pretty satisfied with their lives, but they were a ball of worry. They thought one little slip, one mistake, and their good lifestyle would slip away from them. And so one thing that's going on here is a bias that's usually referred to as loss aversion. And I think this was one of the ones that came up with a famous couple, Tversky and Danny Kahneman, came up with loss aversion. And it's basically, we feel far worse about losing something we have than we felt good about when we got it in the first place. This closely related idea is called the endowment effect. The endowment effect is that we put more value on something you actually own simply because you own it. If I buy a boat for $10,000, I'm unwilling to sell it to you for $15,000 because I now own it. That is not, of course, strictly rational. Another finding from UBS is that people who had $1 million in net worth thought $2 million would be the right number for financial security. The people with $2 million thought $5 million would be the right number. Those with $10 million most often said $25 million was the net worth that would allow them to feel secure. I don't think there was anybody with $25 million in this survey, but if there were, they probably would have said $50 million. So these are some of the things I write about. It generally fits under the heading of personal finance. I don't really like personal finance as a topic. Most of it is simply dreadful. What's particularly aggravating are pieces that might begin under 5 investing secrets of the rich, which you usually find out reading that one of the big secrets was getting rich in the first place. Another idea that comes up in personal finance is called zero risk fallacy. This might be one you haven't heard. It's a funny tendency people have to take risk in one area of their life down to zero, and then they feel better. They don't have to worry. The smarter thing to do is to balance risk around all aspects of your life. So somebody might say, I don't like risk, so I'm going to pay off the mortgage. Meanwhile, they've taken up skydiving and all their life savings is in Bitcoin. I mean, that happens. I got an earful after a column I wrote on proposed revisions to 529 savings plans for college education. My only offense was pointing out that most of the taxpayer subsidy in 529s flows to upper middle class families, not to working class families. That's just fact. These columns made affluent people like the angry callers into my office look bad, and they're the very people who thought they should be celebrated. They're not rich, they're just a little bit ahead. And every nickel they've earned, every nickel, they always seem to volunteer to me. This is a wonderful illustration of what's called self-serving bias. It's another little mental process running in your heads that it leads us to give ourselves the credit for all the good things we enjoy, while all the bad things that happen to us must be the fault of somebody else. Maybe in some ways this is a good thing. Another mental shortcut that developed over the years that actually helps people because it allows you to recover from the terrible things that happen in life. And people are really resilient. You can undergo a tragedy in 2019, God forbid, and by 2021, your happiness and life satisfaction is largely recovered. But the self-serving bias drives me crazy. I bump into that all the time. And one of my favorite studies that illustrated what I'm talking about was done with undergraduates at Cal Berkeley. I found out about this one from the writer Michael Lewis. These college kids were volunteers and they were brought into the study center and told that they were going to be observed discussing some important issue on the campus. There were 4 students in the group. And just as the discussion was about to start, one of the 4 was randomly assigned to act as the facilitator for the discussion. Then, halfway through the discussion, there was a short break and the group was given a snack. 5 cookies on a plate. So you get it? Some of you have already figured out the point of this study. 4 college kids, 5 cookies, and the facilitator, randomly chosen just minutes before, invariably ate the 5th cookie. The same result happened no matter if they were men or women, native born or immigrant. The randomly assigned facilitator thought he or she had earned the 5th cookie. So it's my guess, that we here have all been handed the extra cookie. Everybody in this room is lucky to be here, lucky to be part of our community. Many of us, the rest of our lives, will be presented with many more extra cookies. And you may find it easy to think that you've somehow earned the 5th cookie. The world would be better off if you can remember this little teaching and at least share the extra cookie. And you'll probably be a lot happier.